Hi, I'm Odellis. My sister looked me dead in the eye and said, "Your rent's tripling to $5,900, or get out by morning." She knew my son was in the ICU. She didn't flinch. No mercy, no grace. But I didn't scream. I didn't beg. I just handed her a black envelope. And when she opened it, her face went pale, like she'd just seen a ghost. Because I wasn't just her tenant. I was the owner of the entire building. But what broke me wasn't just the rent. It was the years I let them treat me like I didn't belong in my own bloodline. How did it get this far? And what exactly was inside that envelope? This isn't just a story about property. It's about something stolen, then silently reclaimed. Before we dive in, what time are you listening to this and where from? Drop it in the comments. I'd love to know who's hearing this story. By the time I got back to the apartment, my legs felt like they didn't belong to me anymore. 13 hours at the hospital, most of it spent in a stiff vinyl chair beside Malik's bed, watching monitors beep, while nurses whispered updates I could barely absorb. The cold air bit through my coat as I climbed the 3 narrow flights of stairs to my unit, the building's hallway still dim, still drafty, same as always. Then I saw it, a bright pink sheet of paper crookedly taped to my front door. My keys stalled in my hand. The paper flapped a little at the edges from the hallway draft. I pulled it off carefully, my breath fogging the air. The first line hit like a slap. Effective immediately, rent is increasing from $1,900 to $5,900. Pay or vacate by 10 a.m. tomorrow. No greeting, no explanation, no warning. Signed at the bottom, Seraphine Nash, Managing Partner, Nash Properties, LLC. My own sister. For a few seconds, I just stood there, trying to decide if this was some kind of twisted joke. But the embossed letterhead told me it wasn't. It was the real deal. I unlocked the door and walked inside. The apartment was cold. I hadn't turned the heat on since I'd spent the last few nights at the hospital, sleeping in the family waiting room. I dropped my bag by the door and sat down on the worn-out couch, still holding the notice in my hands. Seraphine didn't call. Didn't text, just slapped this on my door like I was a stranger. It wasn't always like this. 8 years ago, I moved back here when Dad started getting sick. I gave up a promotion in Chicago, moved into this very apartment, Unit 3B, to help out. Back then, Seraphine swore we'd settle the inheritance later, said everything was being held in trust until the estate was finalized. I believed her. I wanted to believe her. She was my big sister. But months passed after Dad died, then years, no final will, no lawyer, just Seraphine taking over piece by piece. At some point she stopped calling me her sister and started calling me the tenant. I pulled out my phone and tried calling her. It rang once, then kicked straight to voicemail. I hesitated before speaking. "Hey, Seraphine, I just got the notice. Malik is still in ICU and I really can't deal with moving right now. Can we talk?" I sent her a follow-up message, short and pleading. 30 minutes passed. Then an hour. Her reply came after midnight. "This isn't personal. Business is business. You've had below-market rent for long enough." I stared at the screen. No concern for Malik. No question about how we were holding up. Just those flat, clipped words. Business is business. Right. The radiator hissed in the corner, trying and failing to warm the room. I went to the kitchenette, found a packet of tea, and stood there waiting for the water to boil when I heard a soft knock on the door. I hesitated, then opened it. "Odellis, honey," came a familiar voice. It was Mrs. Bellman from 2A, widow, always smelled faintly of lavender and menthol rub. She held out a container. "Thought you could use something warm." I thanked her, voice catching a little. She looked at the paper still clenched in my hand. "She left one on my door too last fall. My rent went up overnight. Told me I could find other accommodations if I didn't like it." I didn't know what to say. Mrs. Bellman patted my arm gently. "You don't deserve this, and neither does that boy of yours. She's cold, that one. Cold like a fish." I gave her a tired smile. "Thanks for the soup." When the door clicked shut, the silence returned. Thicker, somehow. By 3 a.m., I was back at the hospital, seated by Malik's bed again. He was still under. The machines kept doing their thing, blinking, pulsing, keeping time like a slow mechanical metronome. I reached into my bag, pulled out my laptop. The hospital Wi-Fi was sluggish, but it was enough. I logged into my email, found the old PDF I'd nearly forgotten about. Deed transfer, Unit 3B, Nash Building. It had my name on it. Odelus Nash, sole owner. Dated 2 weeks before Dad went into surgery. Notarized, filed, quietly finalized. I blinked at the screen. The document had always been there. I'd saved it out of grief, maybe out of some misplaced sentiment, but I never shared it with anyone, not even Seraphine. She didn't know. No one did. I looked at the name again, printed in thick legal font. Mine, not hers, not Nash Properties LLC. I closed the laptop slowly and reached into my purse for a black envelope. It was stiff, heavy, the seal still intact. I'd kept it for emergencies. I'd hoped never to open it. But that pink slip changed everything. My fingers curled around it. I didn't want to use this, I whispered under my breath, eyes never leaving Malik's face. But she left me no choice. The envelope felt heavier than it should have, like it knew what it carried. I slipped it back into my bag, zipped the leather closed, and stood. A nurse in blue scrubs nodded gently as she passed, wheeling a tray of untouched breakfast down the hallway. The fluorescent lights above buzzed faintly, but the real hum was inside me. Not fear, not quite rage either. It was that still, crackling place between survival and silence, where something hard begins to wake up. I leaned in over Malik's bed before I left the ICU. He was asleep, curled slightly to his right, a wire running from the monitor to his chest. His lips moved a little, as if he were dreaming of running again, or maybe just breathing easy. "I'll be back before lunch, baby," I whispered, brushing a curl from his temple. "Mama's got something to handle." It was 9:07 when I stepped outside. Newark's winter air hit like a slap, cold, sharp, honest. I walked straight past the parking meter I hadn't fed since last night. Let them ticket me. I wasn't in the mood to be scared of small things anymore. By 10:02, I was stepping into the glass lobby of the Channing building. Marble floors, some soft piano music overhead, the kind that tried too hard not to be noticed, and a receptionist who looked barely old enough to remember dial-up internet. She glanced up, didn't smile. "Name?" "Odelus Nash." She typed something, frowned. "Do you have an appointment?" "No." She looked up, lips pursed. "Then I'm afraid I'm her sister," I said plainly. That made her blink. Then, without bothering to hide her doubt, she picked up the phone and murmured something I couldn't hear. I didn't wait. I walked past the desk. That's when a young man with slick hair, a sharp navy blazer, and a smug face stepped into my path like he'd been rehearsing the move all morning. "Ms. Nash?" His voice tilted upward like I was a name he was trying to remember from a file he didn't want to open. "Yes. I'm Gregory, Seraphine's assistant. All meetings are by appointment only. I'm her sister." He gave a dry, almost pitying chuckle. "Not in this office, you're not." There it was, that line, like I was just some woman showing up at the wrong window at the DMV, not someone who had changed Seraphine's diapers, cleaned our father's IV tubes, or held her hand when her credit tanked and she cried in the driveway like the world owed her everything. I looked past him, toward the thick glass door marked Executive Suite, S. Nash. "Tell her I'm here, or I'll tell security what's buried in the basement filing cabinet under D for deed." His jaw tightened. 5 minutes later, he returned with a stiff nod. I walked into the office like I belonged there. She was seated behind a desk large enough to land a drone on. The room smelled like peppermint and paper. A green drink rested beside her MacBook, probably her usual matcha with oat milk. She didn't stand, didn't even blink. "Well," she said, tapping a key without looking up. "You made it before noon." Her voice had changed, too level, too neat. "I didn't come to talk about the weather." "You never do," she muttered, and finally looked at me. Her eyes scanned my coat, my jeans, the tired on my face like she was appraising the damage. I sat across from her. She didn't offer me water, didn't ask about Malik. You got my notice? I did. She folded her hands over the desk. The market's changed, Odalis. You either pay the updated rate or you vacate. That's how this works, you know that. I know a lot of things. Then you know it's not personal, she said, lips curling just slightly. It's business. Always has been. I reached into my bag, pulled out the black envelope, laid it on her desk like a quiet bomb. Before you throw around more legal phrases, you might want to read this. She hesitated. That was new. Then she slid the document out, her eyes moving fast. Left to right, again, slower. Her hand twitched slightly at the bottom where the notary seal caught the light. This is, she began. It's the deed. Fully notarized. Dated 2 months before Dad passed. I'm the legal owner, not partial, not pending. Full. I let the silence work. She set the papers down carefully. You're bluffing. You know I'm not. Her tone hardened. I've been managing that property under my LLC for 6 years. You can't just walk in now and pretend. I'm not pretending. I reached into my coat and pulled out the second document, thick, stapled, dated. These are the filings you made under Seraphine Nash Holdings LLC. You never informed me, not once, and you filed them under a beneficiary trust you didn't have legal right to access. She stared. Her nails tapped the desk once, then again. Her cool cracked just a little. I handled the taxes, the maintenance, the repairs. You also raised rents on elderly tenants without notice, including Mrs. Bellman downstairs, who's living on a pension. Her voice tightened. She pays late every month. And you still gave her a 60-day notice in winter? I said. You raised her rent by 30% without heat upgrades. You raised mine by triple, while my son's fighting to stay alive. Seraphine's eyes narrowed. I warned you years ago, Odalis. You always think with your heart. That's why you're stuck in places like this. That's why you'll always be small. It hit. She knew it would. But this time I didn't flinch. I stood slowly. Gathered the documents back into my bag. You didn't just evict me, I said, my voice steady. You tried to evict your nephew while he was hooked to a ventilator. She didn't respond. I turned and walked out. No yelling, no parting shot, just the quiet kind of exit that feels final. I stepped back into the hallway, past the receptionist, toward the elevator. Just before the doors slid closed, I heard hurried footsteps. Gregory. He slipped in beside me, panting slightly. Miss Nash, wait, off the record. How long have you known about the deed? I looked at him. For the first time, I really looked. His tie was slightly askew now, and he smelled faintly of panic. Long enough, I said, and let the faintest smile reach my lips, to know I don't owe her anything anymore. Gregory didn't say another word. He stood frozen outside the revolving doors, still holding the elevator button like he couldn't decide whether to chase after me or disappear into his little clipboard world. I didn't wait to find out. I stepped out into the chill of Newark air, let the glass doors shut behind me, and walked the 3 blocks back to my building without even checking the time. 2 days passed. I didn't do anything loud. I didn't scream or warn or send a single warning email, but I did sleep with the envelope beside my bed, and I did file one thing, an anonymous request for an inspection, not just about my own unit, about the entire property, because this wasn't just about me anymore, not after what Seraphine tried to do to Malik. By the second morning, I was up before the sun, sorting Malik's hospital discharge papers on the kitchen table. The light in the living room was still off, and the radiator clanked like it always did in winter, more noise than heat. I was rereading the allergy section in his prescription list when a knock came at the door. 3 short taps. Firm. Deliberate. I opened it to find 2 people in dark city-issued jackets, one older man with tired eyes, one woman with a no-nonsense clipboard. Miss Nash? The man asked. Yes? We're from Newark Housing and Urban Affairs, responding to a code enforcement request. Mind if we come in? I nodded once, no dramatics. Just opened the door wider and stepped aside. They introduced themselves, Mr. Eldridge and Ms. Carr, and then wasted no time. The woman lifted her tablet. The man glanced at the baseboards like he already knew where the problems were. We'll start with the common areas, then your unit, Ms. Carr said. Is there access to the basement? There is, I replied, but you might want a mask. It smells like wet cardboard down there on good days. They exchanged a quick glance, and I could tell this wasn't their first time dealing with this kind of landlord or this kind of mold. By the time they finished the hallway and stairwell audit, rusted hinges, missing rail bolts, loose lighting fixtures, I'd brewed a pot of coffee. They didn't take any, just kept moving room to room, methodical and quiet. At one point, I stood near the window, watching my neighbor's curtain twitch across the hall. A few doors cracked open. A man from 4B peered out with his oxygen tank in tow. From somewhere down the corridor, a whisper floated over. You finally did it, didn't you? It was Mrs. Bellman from 3A. She looked older than I remembered, paler. I didn't say much, just met her eyes and gave a small nod. It's time the truth got some air, I said. Mr. Eldridge returned upstairs just as she shut her door. We'll need photos of the boiler room and sprinkler lines, too. This place hasn't seen a full review in years. I followed them downstairs again, through the warped wooden door that barely latched. The hallway lights flickered as we stepped into the basement. One bulb hummed loudly, the kind that makes you feel like something's about to explode. Black patches traced the wall above the water heater. Mr. Eldridge pulled out a pen light and muttered, this isn't just age, this is neglect. He didn't say Seraphine's name. He didn't have to. By 9 a.m., they'd filled 3 pages of violation notes, all photographed and time-stamped. They were documenting everything. I answered when asked. I didn't embellish. I didn't accuse. But my silence was loud enough. The last straw for me? It wasn't even the rent. It was watching my boy struggle to breathe in an ER while my sister emailed a revised lease with a market adjustment clause. $5,900 for mold and roaches and flickering heat. Upstairs again, Ms. Carr tapped her tablet and said, We'll be recommending partial shutdown of the east stairwell. It's not structurally sound. I nodded. There's also something off about the boiler pressure. She raised a brow. Noted. I turned toward the lobby just as I heard it. The sharp click of heels against linoleum. Quick. Furious. And then Seraphine's voice rang out like a blade. What the hell is going on here? She marched in wearing her power coat and pointed shoes like she owned the building, even though the papers in my desk drawer said otherwise. Mr. Eldridge didn't flinch. Ma'am, we're conducting a compliance inspection. The property was flagged for review by the listed owner. Seraphine spun, eyes narrowing. You filed this? She barked at me. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't move. I authorized it, I said plainly. She blinked hard, like she couldn't believe the words came from me. You've lost your damn mind, she hissed. After everything I've managed, everything I've carried, this is how you thank me? Filing complaints like some stranger off the street? I kept my arms at my sides. You raised a sick child's rent to $5,900 and called it just business, I said. So I'm doing business too, just the kind that follows the law. Her lips curled like she tasted something bitter. You always did have a problem staying in your place. Mr. Eldridge cleared his throat politely, trying not to get pulled into it. Seraphine whipped around and pointed a perfectly manicured nail toward the door. You'll regret this, Odalys. I swear on everything. She didn't finish. Her voice cracked, and then she spun around, stomping out before she could lose any more ground in front of witnesses. The hallway was silent. Ms. Carr turned to me and said quietly, We're going to need to shut down the east stairwell until repairs are made. I nodded. And, I added, you should schedule the fire marshal for a full audit of the boiler room. I don't trust a single thing she had touched. The inspector stared at me a beat. You're not playing around, are you? I exhaled. Not shakily, just steady. Tired, but steady. Not anymore. I stood by the stairwell a second longer, letting those words settle in my bones like bricks finally finding place in a foundation. Then I turned and walked back toward my apartment, one steady step at a time. I didn't look over my shoulder. Seraphine had gotten too used to people flinching when she snapped. That wouldn't be me anymore. By the time I reached my door, the hallway had fallen quiet again, save for a soft thump of footsteps coming from upstairs and the faint creak of the elevator cables shifting. Life in the building was returning to its usual hum, but under it now ran something new, an undercurrent of awareness. Folks knew the silence had been broken. Back inside, I slipped off my shoes and went straight to the kitchen, pouring a glass of water I didn't drink. The adrenaline was fading, leaving a low ache in my spine and a heaviness behind my eyes. But just as I sat down, my phone rang. I glanced at the screen. Janine, nurse line. I stood up fast, knocking the edge of the table with my knee. Hello? Odalys? He's stable. Breathing easier today. I think, if all goes well tonight, you might be able to bring Malik home tomorrow. I gripped the counter with my free hand. Are you serious? I wouldn't say it if I wasn't, just wanted you to hear it before shift change. The call ended. I stayed frozen in place for a breath, then picked up Malik's little stuffed lion from the windowsill. The seams were worn near the paws where he used to rub it in his sleep. I pressed it against my chest. We were almost there. By 4, I was at the hospital. I'd grabbed the lion and a bag of clean pajamas for Malik. His cheeks had color again. Not much, but enough to let my shoulders relax. Mom, he whispered, his voice scratchy. Did you bring him? I pulled out the lion. Right here. He smiled, the real kind, the one that curved slowly and stayed. I want to go home. Soon, I said, brushing his hair back. We're getting closer. I sat there for maybe 20 minutes, humming softly while he drifted. For the first time in what felt like years, I allowed myself to believe, really believe, that we might come out of this intact. Then my phone buzzed. Gregory, FYI, Seraphine's not taking this quietly. I didn't even have time to reply before someone knocked on the room door. A man in a delivery jacket stood there, holding an envelope the width of a brick. Are you Ms. Odalys Nash? Yes. You've been served. I signed, took it, and stepped into the hallway before opening it. Civil complaint. Superior Court of Essex County. Plaintiff, Seraphine Nash, alleging fraudulent transfer of deed, illegal occupancy, and immediate request for injunction on all property income. She was trying to freeze everything, every dollar that paid for Malik's care, the utility bills, even emergency repairs. The gall. Back in the room, Malik stirred. Mom? I slipped the envelope into my purse. Just paperwork, baby. Nothing you need to worry about. He blinked slowly, trusting me. I smiled, kissed his forehead, and then excused myself to the hallway. As soon as the door closed behind me, I gripped the wall and let the tears fall, but only for 1 minute. 1. I counted. Then I took a deep breath, pulled out my phone, and started calling people. My old paralegal friend from community college, a tenant rights attorney I'd met last year at a Newark forum, a guy Gregory once mentioned who specialized in housing disputes. I wasn't waiting for Seraphine's fire to burn through everything. I was building a firewall. The next morning, I was outside Newark Civil Court by 8:15, blazer pressed and documents neatly filed in a manila folder. I didn't have a fancy legal team, but I had facts, and I knew how to read fine print. Inside, the clerk glanced at my ID and paused. Oh, she said, eyebrows lifting. You're that Nash. I nodded, unsurprised. Seraphine had likely painted me as some unhinged squatter trying to steal the family legacy, but I didn't flinch. I'm here to file a countersuit. The woman blinked. You're countersuing her? For fraudulent mismanagement of shared family property, I said. Neglect of tenant welfare, illegal rent hikes on protected residents, and breach of fiduciary duty. I handed over copies of building inspection reports, financial statements with glaring irregularities, and, most damning, email printouts from Seraphine herself, bragging about draining the old girl dry before city eyes catch on. The clerk glanced at the stack. We'll log this today. I turned to leave, but the sound of a horn caught my attention. Out front, a silver Jaguar pulled up like it owned the sidewalk. Seraphine stepped out in a trench coat that probably cost more than my car, sunglasses perched on her head like a crown. "You don't stand a chance," she called. I didn't stop walking, but I looked up at the courthouse behind me and then back at her car. "You've forgotten one thing." She cocked her head. "What?" "Truth leaves paper trails, and I kept every one." Her smirk wavered, just for a second. Then she spat, "See you in court, little sister." I didn't even glance back. "Not if the IRS sees you first." Seraphine's smirk lingered for a second too long. I didn't flinch, just turned my back, stepped down the courthouse steps, and let the wind carry her perfume far behind me. Her threats didn't hit the same anymore, not when I had something solid, something she didn't count on. Records. The next morning I was sitting across from Maya Grant, sharp suit, sharper eyes, inside a firm that didn't believe in second chances for criminals. The office was quiet, no framed photos on the wall, just binders, brass paperweights, and a coffee machine that hissed like it meant business. "I reviewed your father's trust and the transfer documents last night," Maya began, flipping a file toward me. "Legally, you're the heir. Seraphine's name isn't on anything binding, but Odellis, the trail she's left, this goes beyond civil court. It's criminal." I leaned in slowly. "I need you to show me everything. No filters, no soft landings." Maya opened a folder and slid it across the table. "Let's start here." The first page listed a $72,000 payment made last summer to New Valley HVAC LLC. Maya tapped her pen. "Fake company, no business license, no tax records. The EIN listed here belongs to a defunct daycare in Ohio." I didn't say anything. My eyes moved to the next page. "Monthly consulting fees, 18 grand. It's being funneled into a personal account under Seraphine's maiden name." I blinked. "She's routing building funds into her own pocket?" Maya nodded. "She set up a straw account. It's been going on for years." I tried to swallow down the heat rising in my chest. It didn't work. "She raised my rent," I said quietly, knowing she was stealing the money anyway. There was more. Pages of rent ledgers showing tenants who didn't exist. Units marked "in use" with full credits applied, even though the actual apartments had been vacant for years. She'd been writing off expenses and pocketing the money like it was her birthright. I stared at the stack, suddenly remembering the day after Daddy's funeral. Me, broken, still in my dress shoes, barely able to sign a check. Seraphine had slid a stack of documents across the table. "Just trust me," she'd said. "I'll handle everything." And like a fool, I'd trusted her, because she was blood, because we'd been raised to believe family was safe ground. But nothing about this was safe. Not for me, not for Malik, not for the seniors she overcharged, pretending it was for new elevators that never showed up. Maya let the silence sit for a moment before she spoke again. "I've already drafted criminal complaints, financial misconduct, fiduciary abuse, tax evasion. If you give me the green light, we file today." I opened my mouth, but before I could answer, my phone buzzed. "Malik." I stepped outside into the hallway to take it. "Hi, sweetheart." His voice was small but clearer than yesterday. "Mama? Nurse Janine says I might come home soon. Can we decorate the tree when I do?" I closed my eyes, breathed through the sting. "We'll use every single light in the box," I whispered, "even the ones that blink too fast." "Okay," he said. "I want the gold star on top." I stayed there with him on the line for another minute, listening to his breath, his hope, his little, "Okay, bye, love you," that made everything real again. Back in Maya's office, I sat down and picked up the pen. "I don't want revenge," I said. "I want a clean building. I want seniors who've been scammed to get their money back. I want a home my son can come back to without hearing the words eviction or unfit mother." Maya nodded once. "Then we do this by the book, and we make it public." We went over everything again, line by line. She highlighted the most damning documents. She pulled up archived emails from Seraphine's assistant, ones that hinted at double books and off-the-record charges. When we reached the last folder, Maya hesitated. Her fingers hovered over the tab. "There's one more thing." She slid a copy of a notarized transfer across the desk. It looked familiar. until I saw the signature. "Wait," I said, frowning. "That's supposed to be mine?" She turned the document around and pointed. "Look closer. This version? It's been used to authorize withdrawals, transfers, even lease terminations. But the ink, the pen pressure, it's all wrong. We ran a forensic scan. That's not your handwriting." My throat felt like it closed for a second. She forged my signature? I didn't say a word after Maya turned the page and showed me my own name, my signature, curving in ways I'd never learned to write. I just nodded, slow and steady, like something in me had gone cold. By the time I stepped outside her office, the wind had picked up. The December chill caught under my collar, and I pulled my coat tighter. Newark wasn't kind in the winter, but that day the air felt like it matched me. Sharp. Focused. I didn't go home. I didn't even stop by the hospital. Not yet. Instead, I took a walk, circling 2 blocks until I saw the tiny corner cafe where the windows always fogged up around this time. I pushed open the door, let the scent of burnt espresso and warm bread greet me like a memory from a better life, and found her, Lisa Fenton, already waiting. She sat at a back table, laptop open, pen tapping her notepad. I'd read her pieces before, stories that peeled back walls, exposed mold, corruption, the quiet abuses of power landlords thought they could bury. She didn't look up as I approached, but I could feel her clocking every move I made. I didn't offer pleasantries, just sat across from her and slid the manila envelope onto the table. She glanced down at it. "You're not pitching a story?" "No," I said. "I'm handing you insurance." She finally met my eyes. "Against what?" I reached into my coat, pulled out a flash drive. "If anything happens to me or to my son, this goes public. All of it. I already left a copy with my lawyer in a safety deposit box. Yours is the trigger file." She didn't touch it. Not yet. Just tilted her head. "You sure you want this war?" I looked out the foggy window, then back at her. "It already started. I'm just drawing the map now." Lisa nodded once, then peeled open the envelope. She started scanning the first page, a receipt for a payment to New Valley HVAC LLC. I watched her face change with every line, the shell companies, the double-billed repairs, the maintenance charges on units that had been vacant for years. She let out a breath. "She funneled all of this through your name?" "She forged my signature on several of the authorizations," I said. "That's what lets me go public. But it's not just about me. Some of the tenants she stole from, one is 84, another has stage 3 cancer. I want that included." Lisa clicked her pen and started scribbling. "Understood." From there, the day moved in quiet, controlled steps. After leaving the cafe, I stopped at City Hall with Maya. We filed a lien on the building, blocking Seraphine from selling or transferring ownership. Maya also finalized the restraining order, and I signed it without hesitation. Before I left, I asked her to help me draft letters for each tenant. Not legal jargon, just something human. A clear message that their rights mattered, and that someone was finally standing up for them. Maya looked at me, thoughtful. "You're not going for revenge." "I'm going for structure," I said. "No more screaming matches, no more backroom deals. This isn't about anger, it's about foundation." She smiled faintly. "Good, because the more solid your case, the less she can wiggle." I didn't respond to that. I just nodded and left, letting the silence in the elevator wash over me like a pause in an old jazz tune. Still, but waited. Later that afternoon, I made my way to the hospital. Not to visit Malik in his room, but to sit quietly in the cafeteria downstairs. The kind of space that never really felt alive, always faintly humming with vending machine light and that metallic smell of reheated food. My phone buzzed. "Mama." His voice was small, but brighter than yesterday. "I'm here, baby," I said. "I miss you. I miss you more. When I get home, can we make cupcakes, like the ones with too many sprinkles?" I closed my eyes for a second. "I'll have the whole box waiting. You want red or rainbow?" He giggled. "Both." That laugh was everything. Everything I needed to stay centered, even as the storm built. That night, it hit. Seraphine posted a series of frantic updates on social media, photos of her crying, claims of harassment, screenshots of court papers with my name highlighted in red, cropped to look like I'd gone rogue. "Family betrayal," she wrote in one post. "My own sister is trying to destroy my life. Please help. Legal fees are mounting. They're trying to take everything from me." I didn't respond. I didn't even flinch. Because 5 minutes later, Lisa Fenton posted her teaser. "Tomorrow, 7 a.m., Newark landlord accused of exploiting sick children, forging legal signatures, and targeting low-income families for profit. Documents and voice memos inside. Stay tuned." The comment section blew up. People tagged tenant unions, legal watchdogs, and city officials. Within hours, 3 different housing advocacy pages had reposted the teaser. My phone buzzed again, this time texts. From Seraphine. "How dare you? You'll ruin us both. You want me dead? I'm your sister. I'll destroy everything you love." I stared at the screen, then slowly turned my phone face down on the counter. Let her scream into the void? Around midnight, I took a shower. Let the steam fill the apartment, the tension slide off me in slow layers. I pulled on Malik's favorite hoodie, the one that still smelled like cinnamon from a spill last fall, and curled up on the couch with a book I couldn't focus on. At 3 a.m., the sound hit like a gunshot. Bang! I bolted upright. Another pound, this one rattling the door. I grabbed my phone. Through the peephole, I saw her. Seraphine, hair wild, eyes red, slamming her palm against the frame like it owed her something. "Open this door. You think you won?" I didn't move. I didn't answer, but my hand stayed firm on the phone, camera rolling, as I recorded everything. I didn't sleep after Seraphine's outburst. I sat on the couch with the hallway light bleeding under the door, one hand gripping my phone, the other resting over my heart like I could press the chaos back inside. She screamed for almost a full minute before storming off. I didn't respond, not then. But by morning, Newark had. My phone buzzed non-stop as the first gray light of dawn slipped through the blinds. I blinked, groggy, then leaned forward and saw over a dozen text previews lighting up the screen. Tenant group threads, Maya, even an old neighbor I hadn't spoken to in years. I swiped through, eyes still adjusting. Lisa's exposé had aired overnight. "Odellis," one message read, "You might want to see this." I pulled on my robe and padded to the kitchen, turned the coffee maker on, and opened the link. The screen filled with Lisa's calm, clipped voice. The banner read, "She called her sister unstable, but the documents say otherwise." It opened with visuals of rent hike letters, scanned lease agreements, and then my name, forged. Her segment was sharp, deliberate. She walked viewers through fraudulent filings, forged signatures, tax evasions tied to Seraphine's nonprofit housing efforts. The voiceover cut to audio I'd nearly forgotten we'd given her. Seraphine's voice, laughing. "She thinks she owns this place? She'll be on the street by Christmas." The video paused as Lisa stared into the camera. And she nearly was. I didn't realize I was gripping the kitchen counter until my knuckles turned pale. In scrolling down, I read the comments. "Jail, period. How do people like this sleep at night? That woman and her son deserve better." Somewhere deep in the noise, I heard a quiet breath return to my chest. I called Lisa. She picked up on the first ring. "Odellis," she said softly. "You okay?" "I just wanted to say thank you," I replied. "But this isn't over. Not yet." Lisa exhaled. "No, it's not. This thing's wildfire now." I nodded, though she couldn't see it. Then we let it burn. A little later, I met Maya outside the legal center. She looked sharp, tired, but satisfied. "The IRS reached out," she said without even saying hello. "Your sister's filings are getting pulled for audit." I blinked. That was fast. "Public pressure does that," Maya muttered, flipping through her tablet. "There's potential for tax fraud, real estate fraud, misuse of charitable status. This won't stop at a civil case, Odellis. It's officially criminal." I didn't smile, not exactly, but I stood straighter. And the tenants? We're sending statements today. You're already a folk hero in 2 online housing forums. I nearly laughed. I didn't ask to be anyone's hero. No, she said, looking at me. You just became one by surviving. Around noon, I made my way to the hospital. The air inside smelled like disinfectant and too many stories. A nurse I recognized greeted me with a warm nod. He's stable enough to go home by Friday, she said. That boy of yours is a fighter. I stepped into Malik's room, and his eyes lit up. You bring the sprinkles? I held up a plastic bag. 4 kinds. His laugh was soft but real, and for a moment all the noise outside, the headlines, the threats, melted into the beeping monitors and the way his fingers curled around mine. When I stepped outside his room, my phone vibrated again. It was Maya. Her voice was tight, clipped. Change of plans, she said. Seraphine just filed a motion. I froze mid-step. She's trying to seize full custody of Malik. She's claiming you're mentally unfit. And just like that, the air left my lungs. I didn't answer Maya right away. I just stood there, still holding the phone to my ear, blinking at the words that had just shattered the air around me. She's trying to take Malik, I whispered to myself. The hospital exit door clicking shut behind me. Outside, the sun had started to dip behind the older brick buildings across the street, casting long, solemn shadows. I stood on the curb for a second, breathing in the thick air of Newark in late afternoon. Cars honked a few blocks away, a city still living its life, while mine was being twisted again by the person who called herself my sister. I turned around, went straight back through the hospital's side entrance, and walked the hallways with a steady pace. My heels echoed against the linoleum. Room 310. Malik's room. He was awake, propped up against a mound of pillows. A coloring book lay across his lap, half of a gingerbread house sketched in blue crayon. His IV beeped gently beside him, a quiet reminder of just how fragile his little body still was. "Mommy," he said, eyes lighting up, "you came back quick." I knelt by his bed and brushed the hair from his forehead. "Just had to make sure you were still drawing masterpieces." He grinned and showed me the napkin tucked under his coloring book. "I drew our house, with sprinkles on the roof." I smiled, swallowing the ache in my throat. "You're getting better every day. When can we go home?" "Soon, baby, really soon. And when we do, we're gonna build gingerbread houses that stand taller than the kitchen table." He nodded, believing me. That faith, unshaken even now, was the only thing keeping me upright. I kissed his forehead, stood up slowly, and said, "I'll be back in a little bit, okay? I have to take care of something important." He waved a sleepy hand. "Tell the judge I'm a good boy." I left the room before I let the tears escape. An hour later, I walked into family court beside Maya. Her file was thick in her hand, lips tight, eyes sharp. This was war, and I had the best general in the room. The courtroom was cool, almost too quiet. Seraphine sat across from me in a navy blue pantsuit, hair too done, face too smooth. A mask, one she'd perfected. Judge Holbrook, a stern man in his 60s with a gaze that could slice through cement, sat behind the elevated bench. He flipped through the motion papers. "This is a petition for emergency custody, filed by Seraphine Nash, citing concerns over the respondent's mental fitness." He looked up at me with a steady expression. "Ms. Nash, do you understand the nature of this hearing?" I nodded once. "Yes, Your Honor." Seraphine's attorney stood, voice slick. "Your Honor, our client has evidence that Ms. Odellis Nash has demonstrated erratic, emotionally volatile behavior stemming from stress and possible psychological instability. We believe this poses a risk to young Malik's emotional development." I kept my face still. Seraphine leaned forward dramatically. "She's not sleeping. She's lashing out. I mean, just look at the news. She's made a public mess out of our family. Malik needs stability. I can offer him that." I didn't flinch. I looked right at the judge. "Your Honor, while my son was in the ICU, she raised my rent to nearly $6,000. Tell me, does that sound like stability to you?" The room stilled. Holbrook's brow arched slightly. Maya stood, calm, poised, deadly. "If the court will allow, I'd like to present evidence." She handed over a printed stack: texts, emails, tenant affidavits. "Here are messages where the petitioner refers to the child as, quote, just leverage, and another, if he gets worse, maybe she'll finally break." Holbrook looked down, reading silently. His jaw flexed. Maya didn't stop. "We also have statements from 2 former tenants, both elderly, who report the petitioner claimed Malik wasn't real family and evicted them when they protested." Then came the voice recording. A press of a button. Seraphine's voice filled the room. "She thinks she owns this place? Let her drown in bills. That kid won't be around long if she keeps struggling." The silence afterward was chilling. I stood when Maya gave me the nod. "I've never asked for handouts," I said, voice steady. "I paid my rent. I followed every rule. I even stayed silent when my sister mocked me at dinner tables, but I won't stay silent when it's about my son." I glanced at Seraphine. "She is my sister, but she told me once, family doesn't owe you anything." And maybe that's true. But what she's doing isn't love. It's control. I turned back to the judge. "He is my entire life. I've bathed him through fevers, held him through seizures, and told him he'd always be safe. If that makes me unstable, then I'll wear it." The judge didn't speak for a long moment. He set down the stack of papers, folded his hands, and finally said, "Petition for custody. Denied." My breath caught. He continued. "This court grants emergency sole custody to Odellis Nash, effective immediately. A temporary restraining order is issued against the petitioner. Additionally, based on submitted documents, I'm ordering a financial investigation into the petitioner's real estate dealings." The gavel came down. A sound like thunder. As the courtroom slowly emptied, I stood up, every part of me trembling, but still standing. Still mine. Outside, the hallway was quiet. Seraphine walked past with narrowed eyes. Her voice was low, venomous. "You think this is over? You'll regret this." I met her glare without flinching. "No, I'll rebuild. You'll rot in what you built." She stormed off. Maya approached, a different file in her hands now. She looked at me, slower, more careful. "There's something else. You ready to see what your father left behind?" Maya's voice didn't rise or fall. She just asked like she already knew I'd say yes. I nodded, slow. Not because I hesitated, but because something inside me had already gone quiet, like I'd been walking in a storm for months. And now the thunder was behind me, not overhead. 2 weeks had passed since the hearing. The apartment building had grown quieter in a different way, no longer with fear, but with the stillness that comes after shouting stops. Maya led me into her office. She didn't rush, just opened a drawer, pulled out a file, and slid it across the table. "Nash Properties, LLC," she said. "Sole owner, Odellis Nash." I stared at the stamped page, clean, crisp. My name in bold letters, sealed 3 years ago. There's a note attached. He left it with the lawyer who handled the title transfer, told him to hold it until the time felt right. He called me the morning after Malik was born, said he'd made up his mind. Maya handed me a smaller envelope, cream-colored. My father's handwriting stretched across the front. "In case they ever make you forget who you are." Inside, on a single folded page, he'd written, "This place is yours, not because I gave it, but because you showed up when no one else did. You built warmth into walls that were cold. If anyone ever tries to push you out, use this. Not for power, but for truth. For Malik. For peace." I folded the letter and placed it gently back into the envelope. No tears. Just breath. The kind of breath that finds you when you stop holding it. "Seraphine's accounts?" I asked. Maya leaned back. Frozen. The court moved fast once they realized she was collecting rent illegally. She's been ordered to repay over $240,000 in misused tenant funds. And the eviction? She was served 2 days ago by the building's own committee. The tenants voted, said, It's time the building belonged to people who actually live here. She paused. I didn't have to say a word. The silence that followed wasn't heavy, it felt earned. Later that afternoon, I walked through the building's halls. Mrs. Pennington from 2B was arranging new curtains in the community room, now open again. For the first time in years, light streamed through its high windows. Children's drawings were taped to the walls. Someone had started leaving fresh bread in the shared kitchen. Not store-bought, the homemade kind, still warm. I passed the old elevator where Malik once cried because it smelled like bleach and mildew. Now, lavender oil tucked behind the control panel. Tiny touches of care. Small things that weren't so small anymore. The mural had gone up 2 days ago. Malik and 2 other kids all grinning, arms outstretched in paint. Underneath in block letters, "Family is who shows up when it matters." The words stopped me cold. Not because they were perfect, but because they were true. I kept walking. Back in our apartment, I found Malik on the balcony. He was tugging a potted tomato plant toward the sun. "Careful with that, sweet pea," I said, walking over. He grinned. "I'm making a garden like you said. Look, the mint's growing faster than the basil." "Yeah, maybe it's racing to impress us." He laughed, a full, belly-deep sound I hadn't heard in months, the kind that bounces off bricks and lifts up everything it touches. "Mommy," he said, settling next to me. "This is ours, right? All of it?" I looked out. At the roof, at the sky, at the place that had once caged me. It didn't anymore. "All of it, sweetheart. Not just the building. The peace, too." He nodded like he already knew, then held out a slightly squashed cupcake. "I saved the pink one for you." We sat there on that rooftop, legs swinging, our cheeks sticky with frosting, the city humming soft beneath us. Sunset melted over the skyline like gold ink across gray paper. And for once, nothing needed to be said. They tried to raise the rent on my silence, evict my worth. They used the word family like a leash. But peace doesn't ask for permission, it just begins, where the noise ends. And in that silence, I remembered something they forgot. I never needed a key. I was always the owner.